national and local researchers that there'd be a consensus around. And then sort of there was some pushback on that for one, but also it became clear that we were going to lose the money to bring in other people. So it was sort of like, I kind of threw up my hands, and Poe had not yet been invited. And so I asked John Poe not to pursue that. And so now we will pursue him and others in the context of this May meeting, where again, the idea would be to have 4 to 6 or 8 or whatever people that together reflect something of a consensus among us of the voices that we want to hear, the issues that we want to hear about. And if it can't all be done in May, we can do some, in June as well. So I started with the list that has been sent to me. We started with Andrew Ho. I think Jessica Androzak also had suggested Reardon earlier. Jack suggested Josh Boots. Jessica suggested data quality campaign and CCSSO, both about what other states are doing. So I'm thinking of that as pick one or the other. Emily mentioned Doug, and I'm sorry, I forget his last name. I know he's great. What's his last name, Emily? You're on mute.
I'm on mute.
Now you're not.
It's Connect, K as in Karen, N as in Nancy, E as in egg,
CHT.
CHT.
I would like to add in Aaron and Betsy so that the broader board and the city has the benefit of their presentations. And then the other, I do think that there should be the one substantive recommendation I have is this issue of the dashboard and whether, what it is that a dashboard can provide in terms of presenting information without conflating it, so to speak. So anyway, I don't know if anybody has an idea about a good person to do that. I'm up for ideas. And I also think it might be that I think Jessica might have said that there was someone at the data quality campaign to talk about the kind of simplicity that parents want, which could be sort of a good twosome. If we had someone from data quality to talk about that, and someone who's more connected to sort of the world of dashboards to talk about that, because they might be point counterpoint comparable.
So Ruth, so I'm just looking at the list that you have here. 8 people to provide testimony in what's likely going to be a virtual meeting, and that's kind of a lot. So I'm trying to think of, are we thinking about maybe some alternative ways of presenting some testimony so that we can have a discussion, understanding that the virtual environment is a challenge sometimes for those types of discussions that we're talking about. So would it be, one of the things that we've talked about in part with the Social Studies Committee is providing an opportunity for video testimony, so that they could kind of do it whenever they want and send in sort of 3-minute videos of what they're thinking, so that that's available then for members and for the public to respond to in the actual public meeting. Is that something that we might consider?
Let me say a couple of things. I'm just making a list to try to get on here everything that has been proposed. I'm not saying this is the right 8 or we need all these 8. So I'm not at that point. We will be in 5 minutes. Just to your question, I would really like to have a discussion. I'm definitely more into let's talk to these people and hear them live. And if we have too many, we can do it over a couple of different meetings. That would be more my inclination.
Yeah, I think my concern is the discussion of virtual virtual meetings doesn't happen well.
Yeah, that's not been my impression. I have to say, I've been in a set of virtual meetings, and actually they were pretty good. So
I would just second that the meeting with Aaron and Betsy was actually very productive. I don't know, I mean, I agree that 8 people though in one setting might be a bit much, and maybe we would do some combination and then a follow-up, at some point, the people who just sent something in, just thinking out loud.
did we lose Marcus?
Yeah, what'd you say?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, my screen isn't big enough. Never mind. I just, you weren't on here and I couldn't tell why.
Did you hear me? Did you just hear me?
Yes, I heard you.
Okay. Didn't know if I muted.
I can't get everybody on my screen.
For some reason, I cannot find my thing, my survey, but anyway, go ahead.
Exhibit A, John Paul. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. What do you think of that, Ruth? Like some combination, hybrid?
Or we could do for this time and, and then hold for, or see if there's some that we could do virtually. I mean, we could do, Aaron and Betsy almost virtually from what we had, but I would hate to miss the opportunity to get questions in a public setting from them. But let's just to go in order. Is there anybody missing from this? Any ideas missing from this?
I sent in something just very recently. I was just remembering that the representatives from states that are attempting to be innovative with their state accountability plan.
Right. Is that what you meant? And
I'm quickly at the schedule, and I just saw the presenter's name, the guy who was sort of facilitating. I didn't see the names of the folks, but I think it would be interesting to get an update on like what I would like to get a refresher. I'd have to go back to my notes or see something from maybe NAS summary of the session, who was there and like what they were saying. But I was just thinking that might be useful since they're already trying something different. So that's all.
Alex or John Paul, I think one of you sent out the schedule from NASB at some point. Do we know who the people were that were on that panel?
We know off the top of our head, but I imagine we could find out from NASB who exactly they were.
All right. So.
And then one other thing I would add, and I'm trying to find the email right now, but on this thread of other researchers, Zachary might actually know a little bit more, but I think Zachary and Jessica may have made some suggestions for potential researchers when we were talking about the diversity piece. And I think they threw out some names earlier on, maybe it was Jessica, with thinking about like the diversity of who we're asking these questions. And so, again, I think something again to consider. And I'm trying to find the email because I think Jessica had a few.
I actually went and the others were not really on the topic.
Okay.
I went in, so I thought that was kind of an issue. But I was thinking of the same thing. And one person I thought of locally, Zach, he's one of your constituents, I believe, is Robert Simmons. I mean, he's certainly been looking at this issue for a while. Now he's left. He was like, I think at Maya Angelou, which he's left. But he certainly is.
Constituent. But yeah, no, I know Robert, and I think he would be open to this potentially. He's now with the it's escaping me, but he's leading the effort with Johns Hopkins around like the Black Male Educator initiative that they have.
Right. That's what it is.
And so yeah, no, I think he would be interested in supporting.
All right. Ruth, I finally found it and sent it to you. Sorry, the survey.
So I'm just sort of looking at this. I mean, we have 1, 2 that are kind of sort of national psychometrician types. We've got Josh, Aaron, Betsy, and Robert, who are local.
I mean, one of the things that could potentially be, since we are thinking of the May meeting and we have a little bit of time, if we offer the opportunity for all of these folks to provide testimony either in written or video form, and then we could still, we would be able to throw the net wide so that we get all of the input rather than having to divide it down. And then at the meeting itself, we could have a couple of them, present some highlights of their testimony based on what we've gotten from them, right? Like, so we could invite them based on what they've submitted rather than sort of assuming that they'll be able to hit the points that we want to hit.
And then we could just have a conversation, maybe. Or mostly.
I mean, what I'm also worried about is I think I don't know. I mean, I'm thinking of Ho Reardon. I don't want to speak for everybody on here, but I think it's one thing to say, yeah, I'll come to your meeting and I'll speak to you for 5 minutes or 10 minutes and answer questions. And it's a different thing to say, I'm going to go make a videotape of myself. I just think it's a different dynamic for people. Yeah, I mean, people feel like it's more preparation and all that. So other people weigh in. I'm not thrilled with that idea, but other people weigh in if they.
Don't have any money, right? We don't have any money to offer, or do we have some? If we had some, I would say then maybe we could pay them a little, like a stipend or something, or a small amount to do that preparation.
The long and short of it is, all of our dollars are frozen, and any expenditures really need to be related to either essential services or COVID.
Okay. Okay. Understood.
So one possibility is to. So what else was on the agenda? So I think May was going to be well-rounded. I think April was going to be community schools, and June was going to be quality measures. Am I right? And then we lost a month.
1 second, I'm pulling the document up. Yeah, May was supposed to be community schools and park public comment. April was supposed to be well-rounded education. So it kind of depends if we're shifting everything a month or if we're trying to combine the well-rounded education, community schools, and the quality measures, which was in June.
So I don't want to drive all over everybody in terms of these other issues. But I guess what I would say is that
I mean, one of the things too that I think we should be considering too is the addition or modification of some of our subjects to the current landscape, right? Like, I think having some sort of discussion about, well, what does well-rounded education look like in an era of distance learning? Like, what does that actually mean? think that's an important subject that we should try to figure out how to bring in. I think some of the other things too that that the ombudsman and student advocate are learning about, how are we approaching special education in a time of distance learning. I think those are also really important things too that we need to. I'm not wedded to the way that the calendar currently is. We need to sort of rethink how we're approaching these things.
I agree with that, but I am. Oh, sorry.
What's on our agenda for April?
Social studies.
Oh, we do have a panel, right? Okay.
We have social studies. panel.
We have social studies and the potential of the DME.
Oh, right.
Okay. I like
At the bottom.
I like the idea of the well-rounded education. I mean, that's kind of what we started talking about at our last meeting. But I don't know. Yeah, so I mean, my understanding was we had already decided that we were shifting to the the research focus for May meeting, but is that not decided?
Well, I mean, it's just, we're deciding. I mean, we are the deciders and we all decided. So in that sense, it's decided. I'm just trying to figure out where else there's time. In other words, do we have to just cut this down to four people? And is that what we want to do? Or do we have 4 people now and then we can have 2 or 3 or 4 at another one in combination with something? That's really what I'm raising.
And to clarify, Ruth, these people are coming to share on what?
On their views of quality measures. So we have the list of national questions. There's a list floating around of the local questions that needs to be sort of revised based on the national questions. And so it's largely that. But I would say as we go forward, we have more specific questions as well. So at one point, I don't know if it was in a public email or not, but Jessica and I went back and forth on how data quality, around this issue of dashboards, her concern about dashboards may not be simple enough. What do parents really want? That data quality campaign had stuff on that, had done some research on that. So I think that's a good topic, along with somebody who knows about dashboards. Let's
The other thing that I do want to add is, I know Boots is on this list per Jack's recommendation. Just making sure that any individuals on this list also touch on, I think, some of the concerns that Jack had raised and Jessica, seeing that they're not able to attend this meeting.
Well, Jack said that Josh was good, so we've got that. And Jessica recommended Poe and somebody from data quality, and someone around states. So what am I missing?
The other thing Jessica may have said, let me find it, in her responses to the questions that you had shared, Ruth.
Right, but they weren't on the presenters.
I think she gave a general statement with respect to identifying folks that might touch on, having advocated for STAR at one point.
Okay, I did not see that in her list. I know that Jack asked for that. We have Josh Boots, another person we could ask who also advocated for STARS last time, and is African American, is Raymond Whedon, who testified for the STARS and now I think runs TM.
Yeah, he's the executive director.
Yeah, so that would be another.
I mean, yeah, never mind. I mean, I was also had the question of like, why did we have a list of people who were just for it? I mean, I think Jack's point was really interesting, like that it would be useful to hear from folks who testified because that was before we knew what the tool was actually going to be. Now that we know what it is, it would be interesting to hear from experts, not just people who testified. So I didn't understand why we were just pulling people who were for the stars. I would like to hear from both sides in that, right? And I never got a response to that. So I'm just, yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was puzzling. But
So I'm struggling with this conversation a bit. It just Ruth and I had a conversation, and it seems beyond just like what's the best way of measuring school quality, which I'm feeling is redundant, and we've already talked about that before. But I think what was at the crux of Ruth's and my conversation was like, how do you balance, if at all, this tension between growth and proficiency, and which one accounts for what, and which one should you put more weight on? And so, is it possible to invite these guests, researchers, experts to answer a much more tailored or specific question versus just come share broadly what you think? And to me, if I could frame where not necessarily Ruth is versus myself, but where I think the tension is like growth. I think many would concede is perhaps a better metric for measuring the value add of a teacher and by proxy a school as a whole in terms of what they're doing in the building. But the standard set by a proficiency bar is how systems and by proxy schools hold true to an equitable means by measuring all students. In other words, the proficiency bar is how we ensure that just because you're educated in Ward 8, you're not at a disadvantage and a kid educated in Ward 5 or Ward 3. I don't know what that question is, but it may be more beneficial for me, or at least me, to wrap my mind around, or we might get more out of it to invite these people to answer a much more tailored question versus just come in and talk about what you think is best. What I heard from Jessica was this idea, which Ruth and I talked about, is like she's pro keeping both proficiency and growth. Ruth, if I'm characterizing you correctly, it seemed like you're open to that as well, but it's more about like, do you measure them, how much you measure them? I think that's the value add of having these people join us. Thoughts, reactions? Am I way off?
no, I totally agree. That's the point. And I guess we could go back to some of these other questions.
So could it be, as a suggestion, and I'm sharing as I am not completely confident of my understanding of how our current star ratings are determined, like the numbers. Like I know the rough percentages, but I don't understand the weights and how things move depending on one or the other. And so could we provide that breakdown of the current star framework and charge folk to come in with a proposal for what might be a better representation of that calculation and why?
Yeah.
Because isn't that what we're trying to get at?
Yeah, and I think, point, Zach, I do think that, to me, that's what was interesting about Erin's presentation, both of them.
I agree.
But that in particular, that question of proficiency but also embedded in that question is the question of validity, right? Like, are you really measuring what you say you're measuring? I think that's what Betsy gets at quite a bit. But both of them really, right? I think that is sort of a key question. And also, what is it that we are incentivizing?
The question, though, we're trying to get at.
Yeah.
We have this metric, and we want to know what the experts' opinions are for what might be a better metric. Ruth, is that the idea?
No, I think that's right. So what you're proposing ways of sort of making the initial set, we now know more than when we made our initial set of questions. So here's some improvements, enhancements, additions to our initial set of questions. Right, to narrow what we're asking people to talk about. Is that?
That's my thought. I just think it would be clarifying. And I'm also seeing the inviting these folks as separate than the research questions we previously talked about. I don't know if I should.
Well, I guess we don't have to, because that really was important. You know, it was partly important to our thing. It was partly important to the way we were gonna.
I think it's going to be circular to try to stack people that are pro star or questionable star.
I see it a little bit different. A lot of these people, it's not that they're, which is sort of what you're saying. It's not that it's
Also thinking of like Jack,
pro star or anti-star. That's how Jack was trying to say it. It's not.
but I think that it has a potential if you stack so. And what we're not wanting to do is just have people to come to say star is great or star is bad. It seems like what we want is what is a more equitable metric. That's all. Just like how do we
I think that's one thing. I think I would say it differently, though. I mean, one is what is a more equitable metric? Say, for measuring quality, what is a more accurate and fair metric?
Yeah.
I want to know, is a school a high quality school? Is it or isn't it? How can we know that? And as we've discussed, Zach and others, it may well be that our schools serving our highest poverty kids are worse. I don't want a metric that just dissolves that and says, you know, every school, you know, we're going to have an equal, we are going to by fiat say we have an equal number of high poverty schools that are good and high income schools. I want a rating that's fair and accurate about the quality of education students are getting. And part of the inequity of this is that it's not always measuring that. Is that? I think there's two. One is what?
Maybe it's giving them the metric with those two guiding questions. Do you think this is an equitable metric? Why or why not? If not, what is a better metric? And do you think this is a accurate account of what's happening in schools? Why or why not? If not, yeah, to me, that would be worth people coming to testify on a virtual call that we can then come back to this committee and hash out over versus people kind of staking in their camps. Because what it really comes down to, I don't see a world where we're going to get rid of proficiency altogether. And so it seems like ultimately what's going to happen is we're going to move the numbers, if at all. So this is worth this percentage, this is worth that percentage, this is worth that weight.
Yeah. Can I just say something? I guess I was thinking about this a little differently, or maybe it's an and, you know what I mean? Like, I think we want to have folks who can speak to our measure that we already have, the way that Betsy and Aaron did. So I think I felt usefully. But also, I guess when I was thinking about Doug and the folks from NASB, I was thinking about, you know, people who have experience with doing it differently, and sort of looking at our tool through that lens. So I'm wondering if maybe that is a separate panel, or do we want both?
Say that question again.
Is that a separate panel? I mean, do we want?
What's the question? Say it. You said it well. I just write it down.
Okay. Do we want people who have experience with other tools? You know, where, like at NASB, there were representatives from states who are doing things differently than we're doing them, right? And who are deliberately being innovative. Do we want to hear from them both about what they're doing and also sort of what their perspective is on what's strong and not strong about our tool based on sort of their thinking, and then with Doug, as I mentioned in my email about him, he has experience sort of working in a system that was trying to do both, have a summative and a more descriptive dashboard type assessment. And I've talked with him about it. That didn't work, having both, but I think his perspective would just be interesting. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I'm just hearing, it seems like that can all be accomplished in one panel, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think
I
so
don't,
too.
yeah, I don't know about 4 people. That might be a long meeting, but I definitely think that can be accomplished.
So, I mean, can we pick 6 of these to propose here?
Because you're thinking not all of them will agree?
No, I'm thinking that we could do,
You could do 6? Okay. Well,
Sorry, can I go back 1 second for just
one time, 3 another time. I'm
just in terms of the calendaring. So what are we just moving everything back or adjusting? I mean, I think the calendar was,
we're first trying to figure out what it is we're doing. If we don't know whether it's 1 meeting or 2 meetings, we can't calendar it yet.
I know, I'm just trying to push back on just in terms of the decision making of what goes into which meetings. So is this going to be a proposal to the board to adjust the calendar, or how are we going to approach that?
Well, it can be. I mean, we haven't explicitly voted at the board about everything that's going to be in every meeting, but
True.
we could. I don't think that's necessary, but we could. I think if the committee has a view of what it needs to do, we can go forward with that. The key is, what's the view of the committee? That's what I'm trying to get at.
I would be in favor of inviting fewer folk and trying to do this in one meeting if possible.
So can you, what would your 6 people be, or your 4 people?
Just based on my understanding of who these folk are in their work: Andrew Ho, Sean Reardon, and we've already heard from Aaron and Betsy. I can see a world where we invite them back, but I think those 4 stand out to me. I think Josh does good work. So I would pull out those 5. So Andrew Ho, Sean Reardon, Aaron, Betsy, Josh. Robert Simmons would be interesting. I don't know if his work is as much around school quality as it's around teacher preparedness at this point. So I think his lens is a little different nowadays.
Aren't Andrew Ho and Sean Reardon doing similar work?
Yep.
So maybe one of them would make more sense if we're trying to.
I mean,
Sorry, I'm walking around so much trying to.
I mean, I have to agree with that. I mean, I'd love to hear both of them. I'd love to hear. I mean, one possibility also, Zach, is that we could have them in a committee setting, sort of the way we did Aaron and Betsy. And I guess one question to John Paul and Alex is, we had really a great presentation from the 2 of them. Is there, can we, turn that, I mean, I don't know, I'm trying to think about if we can just turn that into video presentations without requiring them to do it again, but I think that's very hard. It wasn't designed.
The presentation to the research committee is already on our YouTube. We can send it there.
I'm sorry, John Paul, I missed that. What's on our YouTube?
Research committee video, I think, is already I mean, we have that video. We can just use that, right? 'Cause these are also public meetings, so.
No, but I'm talking about turning them into sort of where you were initially, here's like a 5-minute presentation from them.
Definitely do that, Ruth. That's as simple as like iMovie editor. I can even do that.
Yeah, I think the one challenge, Zachary, on that is not necessarily the technical part of it, but making sure that it's something that Aaron and Betsy would agree with the editing part of it, right?
Got it. Yeah, yeah.
That's why I think it might be easier just to ask them to submit hey, we really appreciate that. Can you summarize what you talked about in 3 minutes in a video, and we'll put it on our online for a testimony? Like,
I mean, if they say yes, that's fine. But if they say no, I don't really have time for that. We could ask.
Like who to invite. I think I'm partial to one, academics, and then two, people that aren't part of like the DC minutia, if you will. So like, while a lot of these people are great, I feel like Sean Reardon, Andrew Ho are probably going to provide a more non-biased perspective. It's probably not going to be totally objective because they have an opinion and research interests, but like they don't have local interests as I think a Betsy or Aaron or even Robert or Raymond and others might have. Just my take on things.
You're saying maybe no local folks.
I don't know if it's like no local, but for me, I would lean in more to an academic, and maybe that's something I need to unpack myself. And then two, like I probably would just trust what Andrew and Sean were saying from a more objective place than Betsy, Aaron, Raymond, or Robert.
I think you're right. I think that what we're asking for is research, not opinions. And that's why, yeah, it doesn't make sense, for instance, to invite folks from PAVE because they weighed in. Like, that's not what we're asking for here. We're asking for research.
But,
So
even though it's research, we can, you can get research to say anything that you want it to say, or you can investigate things you want to investigate. And I just find, like, for instance, Raymond, just looking at this list, I'm going to imagine Raymond is probably going to be more aligned with Aaron and his take and view of the world, where Betsy may be a bit more critical. I don't know what their research is going to say, but just given the DC landscape and how that plays out in many ways, including how board members lean in. And so I'm thinking of Jack's emails and even the language he said about like opinion based. I think board members are also going to have visceral reactions to local players versus academics.
yeah, no doubt. But I think I think with research, as you said, you can make it say what you want it to say, but we also are able to sort of parse that out. So I do.
Also, I think there is research that is kind of valid, and then you can, you have different premises and different end goals. So you may do different things with the research, but I don't think that the nature of what the psychometrics find is opinion, it's a fact. Right? I mean,
Well, it's not opinion, it's facts based on a certain set of
yeah, exactly. It's a
data.
Do you think that those facts are going to differ if it came from an academic versus a local player?
Well, I think in this case, I mean, if we're talking Home Reardon, I mean, they're sort of nationally acclaimed, and I think, that's what they do in their life. So I think it's a different, it's different. And I agree with you. But so I think I agree with what you're saying. But Jack really wanted somebody who, it's really unclear. I mean, in the email, he just said he wanted people from the last, who gave testimony last time. And then anyway, so, but the interpretation is for that to be someone who is against the star rating. So that's his ask. So, I mean, I guess we can all say, we don't want to do that. I guess we could say that. but that's why he's on the list.
What I took from what he was saying is that he wanted just more balanced takes on.
I didn't get that. We can go back and read it, but what the email said was that he wanted to hear what people who testified think now that the card has been rolled out.
And then one of his last emails, if I'm not mistaken, was like, "Oh, we should go with Josh, or Josh fits that mode. The rest seem opinion based." And so it almost seemed like he was okay with Josh.
But that's, yeah.
So maybe we can have two panels. Maybe it's like local players, a Josh, a Aaron, a Betsy, and then maybe not local. I don't know. In terms of Sean Reardon and Andrew, if you think they're redundant, I've already engaged Sean. I don't know, Andrew, in the name of just trying to get more diverse voices, it seemed like more people thought highly of Andrew. So I would say let's at least try to see if we can get him.
And also maybe there's a way that informally we can talk to Reardon. I mean, that would be great.
That's what I was thinking. If we can, since he's already agreed to informally talk to us, maybe we can see if Andrew will be game to like more formally present.
And I do think, I mean, I really do think we need Doug Connect or someone like that, because it's about a totally different, it's a different way of answering the question of quality. What is quality? How do we measure it? And to some extent, I think it gets to the broader question, Zach, of how do you balance these things?
So what if we went with those two? I don't know, Doug.
The researcher.
But what if we went with Andrew and Doug as like our academics, and then had a panel of local players? Josh, we already have video from Aaron and Betsy, and so maybe we do Josh, Aaron, Betsy, and Robert.
Can I just ask, why are we doing Betsy and Aaron again, since we already had them? Wouldn't they say the same stuff?
Well, so the reason for me is we had them in a committee meeting, which is different from having them at a public meeting. So if we can get them either to on their own, make their own 3 or 5 minute video, or have the staff do that based on the videos, but working with them to do it, then I think we could do that. Does that sound right, John Paul? Oh, sorry.
Could we just share their PowerPoints with sort of a summary of, like the notes that were taken at the meeting?
Totally could. Be pre-reading.
Yeah.
So that would leave Josh, and maybe one other person, Robert or Raymond.
Well, and the other thing that I think isn't on there, which I think could be sort of the, let's see if we have Andrew, Josh, Doug, we could have sort of this one actually, let me try. I was going to say we could have here this idea of somebody from data quality and somebody on dashboards to talk about the presentation. What do parents want? Which is really it's a separate question. And I wonder if that could be something that we separate out for a separate meeting. We just have 2 or 3 people.
Or perhaps for a committee meeting.
Well, or at a June meeting. Yeah, it could be at a committee meeting. Actually, yes, it could be at a committee meeting. It could be at a June meeting.
Can we vote somehow and decide
On who we're going to have? Yes.
But I mean, then what about Jack and Jessica? We need to.
My suggestion would be for Ruth just to, like, once we're done with this meeting, to summarize it to the full group and say, this is what we're suggesting for the May meeting, and this is what our thought process was in getting to this, and these are the questions that we think that we want them to answer to the full group, just to make sure that it's, check that box and make sure that they understand what the discussion was and how it was moved forward. And and specifically that the suggestions that they made via email because they couldn't be here today were talked about and part of the meeting.
And I'm more of the spirit of, you don't make a meeting. we need to be efficient, and we don't. And I think we heard Josh would be on the panel. We heard Jessica and Andrew is on the panel. And so I think at some point we just need to pull the trigger and say, we heard you, we incorporated your feedback here.
I think we've gotten to a point, I certainly feel in a good position to do that. So what I'm thinking is what we're asking for May is, although one thing I don't think, okay, so I have Ho, Boots, Connect, and then something with the videos, PowerPoints for Aaron and Betsy. Oh, what I was going to say is I didn't think it was right to have just Josh on the local scene with one point of view, but I guess if we have the PowerPoints from Aaron and Betsy, that's sort of a three different views on it, 3 different takes. So that's okay. Ho, Boots, Connect.
There are no other local researchers who would weigh in on this?
A lot of people would. But keep in mind, this is just one meeting.
I know, but I think 4 is a nice number.
Yeah.
2 and 2 would be nice. Local, not local. These are 3 men. All white. Oh, not all white. Sorry.
That's a good push. Maybe that's something, we can go back to the drawing boards or to the broader committee to say we need a woman, not just as a placeholder, but to make this a bit more balanced.
I want to come back. I want to move on, but I also want to come back to this because I don't want to just, we're sort of doing our best to come up with a collection of people that reflect some set of issues and views. And I don't want to just sort of say, well, and then we'll throw one more person in.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we have 2 people here who are national. And we have 1 who's local. But we did all agree that we kind of wanted a more diverse panel. So I'm just putting it out there. Doesn't feel entirely, it's not ideal, but we could do it. So just trying to think of other folks who might be.
Oh, you know what? Actually, I just had an idea. Alex, did you send me the stuff from Child Trends?
Yes, I did.
Because she is both national and local and minority and was one of the best people that spoke last time, not counting Emily, of course. Let's see.
Where and what? Spoke last time.
You know what? She spoke at one of the public meetings.
Harper.
And what?
Kristin Harper.
Kristin Harper spoke at one of the 2 meetings, one of the public meetings in, when we first were doing this 3 years ago. She's a researcher at Child Trends. So she's a national researcher who lives in Bethesda, who spoke about the DC or works in Bethesda. My guess is she probably lives and has a child in DC, which is why she was engaged.
So before we go too further, I'm gonna have to drop off because I have another call at 3 o'clock. But Alex is gonna stay on and continue with the notes and all that thing.
Okay. So Alex, where is that? All right, and to do it to everybody, just so we can all look at it, because then maybe that could actually be.
It's in the chat as well.
All right.
So just to summarize, we're thinking of inviting Andrew, Doug, Josh, and some 4th person perhaps Kristin, the person who testified before, and we would provide them a series of questions to come respond on in the context of our current star rating, whether or not the metric is equitable, whether or not it's an accurate reflection of what's happening in schools. And to Emily's question, you moved the page, I can't see it anymore, but whoever's controlling the document.
It's me, but up here? Okay.
Like what other examples of school quality measures or comparisons might they have?
Here. So these are the notes from the other questions. So let's, so are our metrics equitable? Are our metrics an accurate account of what is happening in schools in terms of quality? Is that a?
Yep. And if they have any examples or experience with other measurements, states or contexts that you believe are better representative.
Love to hear from those folks. I'm going to go back and look at my notes. I know it just complicates things, but the people from NASB, I don't remember which states they were either, but.
So that could, or maybe if it's not Kristin Harper or someone from NASB or
Well, honestly, I would.
quality.
They would be replacing Doug, or I think it would be Doug or one of those people.
But I don't think they were on the kind of the broader metrics, were they?
Some of them were actually taking advantage of the ESSA, what is it called? The like alternative accountability.
Oh. But that's even bigger. I see.
Yeah. And they were talking about the complexity of it, because of the things that actually Jessica raised in her last email today about like what are the requirements in ESSA that make it.
Here's the problem. We have a lot of questions, and we also want to be fair to reflect the views of both ourselves and the people who aren't here. And I do not think that 4 people or 5 people handles that. And so I think what we need to say, I mean, this is where I was trying to go earlier when we were doing the written things. I think we need to come up with a group of people who reflect the feedback, views, perspectives, ideas that we all want to hear. And I don't think Ford does it. So what I think we should do, so here's my recommendation, is that we make this 6 or 8 and we divide it up, because I do think you're right, Emily, that we should have somebody who can speak about those alternatives. I also think Jessica really wanted to have someone from data quality to talk about, she's raised it in 2 different ways. One is stuff going on around the country, and also what parents want. They've done a lot of survey work, and I just think we need to have all of these things. I don't think we can just sort of arbitrarily say we only have 4 people or 5 people. I think we need to make a list. We need to hear them.
Could we, Ruth? Could we do 4 at a public meeting and then 4 at another committee meeting, the way we did with Betsy and Josh, and do the video thing? Ask them ahead of time if we can video the meeting, and then also have either transcription or summary notes that go along with it that are made public, or that we at least share with members. Again, thinking out loud. I don't know. Just trying to.
That works. I mean, that works for me.
It's a way. I mean, I think the main issue is we want to collect as much of this information as possible. I agree with you. I also know that public meetings, I do think 4 just feels right to me. I think more than that is hard.
I don't disagree with that. All right. So we've got an initial 4, and if you want to, there's somebody from NASB group, Emily, instead of Doug.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I
I
didn't
mean-
think of it sooner. Yeah.
But what I do think is important is that part of what is on here is this idea of there are other things to look at beyond test scores. That needs to be part of the conversation. Right? People don't have to go for it, but it's part of the conversation. And so whether it's Doug or NASB, or there's two different things. And then I will relook at what Kristin Harper said last time, or because maybe she fits one of these, and then separately, subsequent can be a committee meeting. We have a discussion with someone from data quality and on the dashboards, sort of that intersection of what do parents want, which data quality is looked at. And then, you know, people who think they can convey that in dashboards more effectively. We can do that at a separate, we could do it at a committee meeting. And then we would have, for this first meeting, so that we have some diversity on local views, we'd have some sort of video PowerPoint summaries from Aaron and Betsy. And Alex, I take it that you guys can work with them to sort of create something like that?
Yeah, we probably could reach out and ask them for their presentations again, which I think we have. But B, just see if they'd be willing to film something else, or we just use their remarks that they made last week's meeting and kind of condense it down into something that's more digestible and viewable.
And that they agree reflects their views.
I mean, yeah.
I mean, that you raise it, that's critical. It has to be there. It has to reflect what they think their views are.
Yeah. I guess to that point, Ruth, and I guess also to Emily and Zachary, were there particular things that you all found, and Marcus too, because you're on the phone, that you all found to be especially compelling or important about Aaron and Betsy's remarks and presentations that you feel the rest of the board should know? And I think that's another important question too.
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
What stood out to me about Aaron, or what was very compelling, was the graphic where he showed the two quadrants of schools on the, let's say, top and bottom end, and how they were moving schools. And so it's and how even those schools that are getting high ratings due to the students who are attending their school, what actually is happening is that they aren't growing that much from where they started. I thought that was really compelling and might be really eye-opening as it was for me. And then this idea around how he started to get at how to adapt the metric, which is again where I think might be the biggest value add for board members. Like what percentages should be weighted, what, where, and how. Betsy, I thought, I'm trying to remember her presentation, but I also thought her analysis of like the trends of the higher at risk, I don't think it's groundbreaking, but the higher at risk schools.
The correlations.
Thank you, Ruth. It's been a long day. Thank you.
And also, can I just add to that, Zachary? I think maybe what you're getting at, she added the special needs.
Right.
Students with special needs, and that was something that we hadn't really broken down before, and I thought that was really interesting. And I just want to second Zach's point about Aaron's the way he weighted things was really interesting, compelling, even just thinking about that when you weight these criteria differently, you get different results. I think it's important for folks to sort of consider that, and what are those different results and what are the implications of that? I found that really fascinating and interesting and compelling.
So I'm thinking one thing, maybe I'll just start by reaching out to Erin and Betsy and see if the extent to which they are open and willing to sort of redo, in effect, just sort of use what they already did to sort of make a 5-minute video with some PowerPoints and video.
I'll take them out to dinner at some point. Just
And
kidding.
then we'll go from there. If they say yes, we have something. If they say no, we'll jerry rig as we've discussed. Does that sound good to people?
To me.
Was that invitation to dinner, was that an incentive or a threat, Emily?
Take it as you want.
Be the one part Marcus responds to.
Thank you for your input, Marcus.
All interesting, all interesting.
Just want to show you're listening, right?
Okay. Right. So we've got four people to begin with. Along with these video PowerPoints for Erin and Betsy. And then separately, at a separate time, we do something on the data quality, dashboards. So the presentation, I guess, is the point. The presentation, and also, Zach, I think it can also get to what you've been raising, which is how can you simultaneously present accurate information on what's going on that's fair as a review, but also conveys the importance of getting to proficiency. Maybe that's even the way we frame it. If that's what people want, and that's what parents want, and that's what we all want, what are ways that we can convey that? Zach, the way my thing is set up, I can't see you, so I don't know why this isn't showing me people. Does that work? So that's how I'm writing it, is sort of, I have a section data quality dashboards, and specifically how to capture quality without conflation with proficiency while maintaining strong stance for proficiency. Or how to capture, I don't even know, how to capture quality clearly without I guess that's right, without conflation, but maintaining a strong stance for proficiency. I mean, that's sort of that's a fundamental question. We can put it to the first group of people, but we can also raise it with these people who know about visual presentations. Does that make sense?
I mean, I think, can I just clarify something? I guess this is a question for Zach in particular. Like, my understanding is our concern about proficiency is about expectations, right? Without lowering expectations.
Without conflate, yeah. For
Yes.
and a drive towards proficiency for all, I think. Is that a fair?
Yes, through the lens of equity. In other words, a concern I have is like on a overly emphasized growth system, how is that not essentially separate but equal?
Right, right. No, I mean, and that's why here, I think Aaron's presentation was especially interesting because he addresses that. Yeah.
All right. Okay, we have a plan.
Yay. That wasn't too
All right. Right. Okay, and then these are our questions. We already did that, okay.
so, gonna die. Jesus.
Do we want to, okay, I guess we need to turn to the survey.
Which doesn't need to be done anytime soon. We should just weigh in on it so that when we are ready to do it, we can do it. We can agree on.
I mean, here's the thing. I want to, if we're serious about asking OSSI to revise this framework before we do in time for the 2021 ratings, but there won't be a set of ratings next year. In time for the 2021 ratings, they need to make a proposal to the Ed Department by next May. And, you know, the way they think about it, fairly enough, is they need time, you know, if they were to take it seriously, they would need time to sort of pull together proposals. And so I think, you know, initially our timing was we should adopt some initial recommendations to pass on to them and to share with the community and council and others to sort of generate a discussion about it in July. So if that's what we want to do, well, I guess we could time the survey to that then. Is that
To the summer, you mean?
well, to sort of July, we sort of put out some proposals and then we would be asking people for their views. I mean, I think Jessica had indicated some preference for front loading the survey. I don't have an opinion really.
She did before, but that may have been before we were in this situation. So now it sounds like she doesn't feel like it's what we should. And I mean, I would have to agree. I don't think the report card, especially since it's kind of, you know, not even on the table this year, it's not on people's minds at all.
So you think we could do some surveying after we come out with some proposals?
Yeah,
Like
I just think
summer into the fall, back when.
What's that? Fall, yeah, when it's back on, sort of when we're back on, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to be back on really in a serious way for.
Right.
All right, so.
But I still think it would make sense to have a pool that we're all comfortable with. I don't see why people don't want to weigh in on it. It's pretty short.
Right.
Can you remind me what survey we're referencing?
Yeah. Ruth, I sent it to you. Do you want to show it? It's just one I was going to, I haven't shared it yet in my ward. I was going to share it at a meeting and then we didn't have a meeting because of this, crisis, but it was just meant to be like a ward level survey for educators and parents to get their input on their thoughts on how useful the report card is to them. So the only feedback we've gotten is very vague feedback from Jessica and Jack that were like, I have a concern about this, but I mean, yeah, I think we need to.
That's right. So we'll just delay on that. So here it is. Do you see that? Does somebody see that?
Yes.
But There it is, Zach, but actually, I think you're right. Let's not even spend time on it now because they all have, let people weigh in and then we'll take it back up. So now I'm taking that off. What else? Yeah. If you want to take a little time to try to answer these questions, how do we define school quality? I mean, Jessica had proposed giving it at a working meeting, which I think is a good idea. I think it would be better to go into a working meeting with an initial set of suggestions possibly, and then have a working meeting discussion. Any thoughts on that?
I'm sorry. I was still, where are you now?
So can you see, I put delay survey until the fall, and then there's Roman 2, how do we define school quality?
Yeah. So you're saying we should try to do that for ourselves?
Well, we could do it right now. And can I just say, for reasons that I do not understand, I can't see everybody. And at this point, the only person I can see is Emily. Oh, and now there's Alex, but that's all I can see. So that's why I'm focused on Alex to Zach and Marcus. I just don't see you.
Zach just closed his camera.
Turn off my camera, but I was on for most of the call. I don't know why you can't see me.
I can see Zach.
I saw you earlier, but it just, there's something about the way it's not you, it's the way my grid is showing up.
It's not you, it's me.
Right.
Right
Do
now,
we want to do this, or we want to just end having accomplished point 1, which is?
I would say let's table this until we've had time to hear from the experts personally. Like I would, because right now you're going to just get board members' fixed thoughts on this. And the hope is hopefully that some people may move, myself included, based on the info that we hear from the experts.
That's interesting.
That's my 2 cents.
So then we do need to add that back up here, the question about what's your view of quality, which I'll just say, so we're ending up with this list, which is good, actually, it's not bad. It's very similar to what we initially wrote up, which is good. We can just go back to that, and I'll spend a little time just trying to adjust it, but it shows both that we did good work that time. We still have some ways of improving upon it. All right. Okay, are people dead? Are we done?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so wait, was there anything else? Was that, those were the 2 main items?
Yeah, I mean, it was who do we want to invite? That's critical. We did that. The survey, which we're punting. And then a discussion of some of the questions that arose from the presentation from Aaron and Betsy. So that was how do we each define school quality? What are the practices that are currently promoted and not promoted? I mean, maybe what I'll do is just send out worksheets and ask everybody we'll just fill out these worksheets on our own and we can bring them to the next meeting and discuss them. Does that make sense?
I think so. I'm not sure. So to what end? I mean, I guess, so to Zach's point, I think the idea of bringing in others, to bring in researchers and experts is I mean, I think it can't hurt for each of us to sort of reflect on it for ourselves and come to those meetings with our ideas clarified. But in terms of spending time discussing it among ourselves before we hear from them, what end would that be? Are we trying to get to one definition as a board? Because I don't think we will.
Well, I think the idea, and I think Zach has expressed this best, is that we're all learning in this, and in theory, open to having a broader vision of this. And ideally, it would be great, and I don't rule this out, to come to a consensus about what improvements we'd like to see. I don't think that's impossible at all.
I don't think it's impossible. My question is timing. Why do it before we hear from the experts?
No, well, my point of doing it now is not to nail it down and say, this is what we think, but rather to create a long list so that we all so we have an understanding of where we all are, why we all have the, it's a, Aaron had suggested it as a way of getting people to focus first on what is it we're trying to accomplish here? What are we trying to measure? That was a reason.
Right. And I guess the other piece of this is to, I don't know quite how to word it, but that what I hear, I might be wrong, but what I think I'm hearing from Jack in particular is that some people's views are, and even some people's research is biased. And it sounds to me that it's like if you come to a certain conclusion, you are biased, whereas if you come to another conclusion, you are not biased, which is kind of the definition of being biased, actually. And I would like, I don't know, maybe it would help actually if we all talked about where we are now, and we are all biased. We all are, right? It's impossible not to be.
But it's premises and goals, and that affects our perspective. That's,
yeah.
You can call it a bias, call it a bias.
Yeah. I guess, yeah. All right. Well, so where are we with that?
I don't know. Well, I think we should, I think I'm sure having a discussion of it at the working meeting. And I mean, I can make up an initial sort of worksheet of what we think is quality and send it around, see what we come up with, and it can be part of a discussion at a working meeting.
Our next
Get on the floor.
would be in May, right before the week, bless you, the week before the public meeting, right?
Yeah.
2 weeks before the public meeting.
2 weeks before the public meeting?
And it'll be the week before the research meeting.
Wait, what? What's the week before the research meeting?
The working session in May is the first Wednesday. Research means the second Wednesday.
Right. So Ruth,
Right, so it's a nice development, actually.
so Ruth, you're saying to have all the board members at the working meeting do this?
Yeah. I don't know, what do people think? I mean, I think that's what Jessica proposed. I thought it was a good idea.
Okay.
Anybody else? Marcus, Zach?
Famous last words.
I have a couple of things that just to make sure we're clear on next steps. But so first thing is the next research meeting is May. What is it? May 13th. And then the other thing is, so with respect to outreach for the panelists for May 20th, would you like us to start reaching out to folks now? Or did you guys determine whether or not you were going to share information with the rest?
Right after this, I'm going to send out a summary email.
Okay. And then based on that, we can identify the method for outreach.
Yeah, and then the other thing I'll do is Zach, you were especially interested in this, that I will go back and look at the initial list of the national questions and just adjust it a little bit to reflect some of the things that you raised that we specifically talked about today that are up in this top thing over here. Okay.
I was trying to get off mute.
Right. And
another question that I had, and I think you answered it already, Ruth. The questions for local researchers was never finalized. I think it'll be adapted based on the questions that were developed for the national researchers, in addition to the questions that Zachary kind of proposed during this meeting.
yeah, can you draft that with those two things, sort of adapting them? So as I recall, the local questions partly were a complete repeat of the national questions, so they should just be adapted essentially with the same words.
Yep.
Then there were some that were just for local and they can be left alone, at least for now. And then add in, sort of edit in the stuff that Zach raised.
Yes, that's doable.
All right. And then, and that one, since we haven't reviewed it, we'll send that one back out for review.
And I mean, largely those questions really are just now going to be used for the discussion that will be happening at public meetings.
Yeah, and for how, I mean, especially as it turns out, it's really for posing questions to Josh, I guess. But, it'll come up again.
Yes, okay. That's everything I had.
Before we go, actually, so about well-rounded education and this question of what does it look like with distance learning, and then the other question of like, what is the state board's role in sort of promoting it? Is that something we are pushing off till June, or is it not on the schedule, or where are we with that?
What are you asking?
Anybody who's on this call? I mean, I guess Ruth, you were thinking about this, like pushing things down the roads, or like that we would have this one in place of the well-rounded. Is it replacing it? Is it just pushing it? What was in June?
The star rating quality measures was going to be June, so that's moving to May. So the two things, as we approach June, the two things that were supposed to have been done that weren't done are well-rounded and community schools. And I know Marcus thought, and I think this makes a lot of sense, is that talking about the community schools in the context of everything that's going on makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, actually, it's not completely unrelated. I guess it is, sort of. Never mind. Yeah,
I mean,
it's not related. No.
I don't want to lose the idea of kids need a balanced, well-rounded education from our agenda. I think it's really important to what we're doing. And as we've discussed, it's a way of connecting in a very positive, constructive way with LEAs that don't always love what we're focused on.
Mm-hmm.
But if we want to do, so I want to lose that.
On the other hand,
But it could be that that for June, we try to focus, we focus more on the current situation. We do the community schools, and we also try to think about the well-rounded in that context.
so should we put off having our committee meetings?
I can't answer that at this moment.
Yeah.
I would also, just to chime in on the committee meeting piece, I would suggest you identify a time to hold one so that we can at least talk through potential contingency planning for what the TNTP project might look like, and just kind of brainstorm and think through some of that.
All right. Well, Zach, are you still there? So I think the next steps was the next step was before we even have a committee meeting was for Zach and I to meet with John Paul or you to sort of come up with a draft of something. Isn't that right? So we need to do that.
To touch base somewhere, someone needs to touch base with DCPS. I mean,
Wait, question. Isn't the freeze by the mayor impacting like the TNTP work as well? Okay.
So from my understanding,